biggest myth I is that you need a fulfillment partner. This always comes up. Is that I guess if you were some large company, yes, you need a fulfillment solution that's probably not in house. But so many of small businesses out there, and there are many who are in my shoes. Um, they outsource to Amazon fulfillment warehouses, to Shopify fulfillment warehouses. They have their own network now. There are a million of them out there that you could use, little ones, big ones, whatever. And what I would say is, unless if you can find a way to keep fulfillment in house, just fulfill stuff yourself, your margins are better, of course.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Ben Sobieck. And Ben, we're going to be talking about a few great topics that I think will be helpful for a lot of people, which include building an e-commerce site that has rich SEO, and then the elements of building an e-commerce site and how to build trust and do that quickly. Importance of email acquisition, customer retention, how to do all of those things in a lean way, and also the importance of choosing a niche for Google SEO purposes and dominating it. So should be a great discussion. And with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Devin. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So now, just as a quick reminder to the audience, so we did have Ben on the sister podcast, The Inventive Journey. So if you haven't had a chance to catch that episode, definitely go and check that out, and you can hear about Ben's journey. But for those people that haven't had a chance to catch that episode, or saying, hey, I don't want a 30-minute version of your journey, give me the 2-minute version or 1-minute version. Introduce yourself a bit to the audience.
Oh, well, thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. My name is Ben Sobieck. I am the inventor of a product called the Writer's Glove, which is a type of glove that it covers your entire hands, and you can type on a computer keyboard with it, and it keeps your hands cold. If they're cold for environmental or medical reasons, this can help you out. And I got my start in publishing, in e-commerce, and editing. I do a lot of writing. This is kind of how the product came about. Was through the act of writing and having cold hands. I'm in Minnesota, and our winters are brutal and very long. And this was a product of necessity, and I'm happy to say that it's right now under utility patent pending with help from Devin Miller's law firm. This has been a great help with getting that applied for. I'm sure it's going to get accepted. But it's patent pending. It's used in more than 50 countries. It's done very, very well for me. And it's been featured in Glamour magazine and is endorsed by the Raynaud's Association.
Awesome. Well, that's definitely a great intro, and it's always fun to hear a little bit about the product and what you have going on. But now for the topics at hand, and if people are saying, great, you have a glove, I'll have to check it out. Now I want to learn all about the expertise you've garnered along the road. Let's dive into a bit of the topics at hand. So one of the first ones that and whether we get through all of them or not, it always makes for a good discussion. But one of the ones that you'd mentioned a little bit, and I think they kind of go hand in glove, but we'll start out with, a lot of businesses, I was going to say every business, but not every business is online, but a lot of them certainly are online, have an online presence, and it certainly plays into how you are doing client acquisition, how you're building it. And so one is, how to build an SEO or a e-commerce site, but just by having a website in and of itself, very unlikely that you're going to be able to just, or magic, I think there's a misconception. Oh, well, if I put a website up online, people are going to magically find it, or Google's going to love me, and I'm not going to have to do anything other than put a website up, maybe put a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post, and that's all I have to do in order to drive traffic, and it'll be magic from there, which, sorry to burst everybody's bubble, is not true, and you have to do more of that. And one of the things that you do as you're building an e-commerce site is you're going to make it rich in SEO. For people that don't, SEO is search engine optimization. Basically, it makes it so Google is going to rank you and people are actually going to find your website. So how do you go about as you're initially building that e-commerce site to get that kind of rich SEO? In other words, how do you go about making it so that it is favorable so that Google will actually like you and rank you?
Yeah, and there are a number of ways to do this, but I'm gonna give you the way that I did it, because when I started, I had no investment. I barely had a product. I sort of knew what I was doing, but the SEO factor, whether you're established or you're new, this is ground zero. Even before you touch an e-commerce platform, because usually, you talk to people, or I do, and they say, "Oh, I've got this great idea. What e-commerce platform should I use?" And I would always tell them, before you even get to that part, that's down the road. First, you know what you want to sell. Second, you have to know how people are going to find you, because the moment that you start building an e-commerce website, whatever it is, whatever kind of website that is, the moment that you do it, you need to have a list. You could tape it on the wall, you could leave it on your computer. You need a list of SEO keywords that you're going to hit, because every single time that you touch something on that e-commerce website, if you can put in one of those keywords, do it. People go and they get degrees in SEO, they get certified, they do all kinds of things. It's worth it. It's a very enriching and engaged field to be involved in. But my down and dirty way of doing things, which is bootstrapping just anything, it's come up with a list of keywords first, so that anytime that you have any customizable field that you come across anywhere on your e-commerce website, you reference that list on the wall, on your computer, wherever it is, and you're putting in one of those keywords. In the way that you start, there are a number of paid services out there. But again, I'm going to come at this from the perspective of somebody who at the very beginning was like myself, literally coming up with this in a garage, not having any money to do anything with. I'm like, just the punk rock bootstrapping kind of way to do things is Google AdWords. It's a free account. That's where you start. Google is the source of truth for SEO, but the place that you start is Google AdWords. It's free. You can run AdWord campaigns on Google. There's all kinds of things that you can do with this tool. But if you have a free Google account, AdWords is free to use. You go into Google AdWords, you go into their keyword planner, and you can start typing in keywords, and Google will just tell you free of charge. Again, it's almost like they're giving away their secret sauce almost. But they will tell you what the search volumes are for those terms, whether those search terms have high, medium, or low competitiveness, if a lot of people are trying to get in there, and then roughly what it would cost if you were going to advertise into one of those keywords. And that's where I started. I knew what I wanted to sell. I knew what niche I wanted to hit, and I came up with a list of like 7 to 10 keywords. You're gonna choose.
Let me dive in just
go
really,
for it.
No, really quick, just as a reference, because I think what you're talking about is great. So, but let me just maybe give just a bit of background for the listener, especially if you first time you're getting into this or you're less familiar. So, as I understand it, they're basically with regards to Google and getting found. Let's say I wanted to go and I was going to go look for writer's gloves. Hey, that's what your product is.
Yeah.
And so there are basically two ways that you can be found on Google. One is for free, one is to pay. Google AdWords are at the top. Whenever you search something, you'll always see, and they always change this a little bit, but it's sponsored or it shows paid advertising or something of that nature. Those first couple search terms on the top or the bottom of each page is going to be paid advertising. In other words, people are paying for when you search certain keywords or certain phrases online. If for the people that are wanting to sell their products, they can pay and they'll be the ones that show up first, or depending on how much you pay, you may second or third or whatnot. The other way is to do SEO, which is you don't have to pay for it. It's how Google naturally or organically ranks people based on relevancy. So you can either pay to be at the top or you can be what Google feels to be the most relevant for those search. So right now, when you're talking about Google AdWords, you're talking about people that are paying in order to rank or be ranked or show at the top or bottom of the page. This is kind of a background for everybody.
Yes, yeah, and that's true. And you certainly can pay to get at the top, but the more economical and the more long term way I think to do it is to go for those organic keywords that will over time just keep building and building momentum with Google, and then you'll move up in the rankings. So even if you were paying for it or not paying for it, you would show up when people go and search for these terms. And I know that the search trends right now lean much more heavily towards social platforms, but I know people are looking for things on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube that they function as like quasi search engines and things. But if you're talking about trying to get customers, customers go to Google to go find something. And at least for the perspective I'm coming at, I have a product that is a solution for something. So people go looking for the solution. Most of the time, they're going to Google. And even if that's not the case with your product, I still think you should start with AdWords and with Google and with that kind of research because of the massive footprint that Google has and can deliver to you. Is it really that bad when I'm starting out if I get 1,000 customers from TikTok or 10,000 from Google? I mean, it's just you're too early to start splitting hairs like that. So
No, and I think that you've hit on a lot of good things. Maybe just to dive into a couple of them.
sure.
You know, I think for the audience, so there's kind of two ways that you can go about finding people. One is when they are going out and searching for something, which is typically Google. I know that there's Bing out there and other ones that nobody ever, or very few people use.
Well,
Some people use them, but Google's by far predominantly. That's when people are actually going out and searching. Most of the time, when it's for like social media, so Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or whatever, it's more of you're pushing the message out. In other words, they're usually going and looking for other content. Your ad pops up and says, "Hey, have you ever thought about buying writer's gloves? They will help you." And so it's more of one is they are looking for it, the other one is you're trying to garner interest from people that are looking for something else, may still be relevant to them. And so for today, we're really more focusing on that Google side of when people are going out and trying to find a product to solve a problem. So now, one thing, and as I like as you hit on Google AdWords, is I think, there's a misconception, I think, for some people, especially if you're just getting into it, is it takes a good amount of time to build up SEO. In other words, if you want to go out and put a website, Google isn't probably even going to consider to start ranking you at earliest if you're really in a niche and awesome, maybe 3 months, sometime more likely 6 months, and it can be up to a year plus, depending on how crowded the market is, how well you do. You may never rank if you don't do a good job at it, but you got to build in that it's going to take months or plus before you're ever going to start ranking if you can get it to where you rank. And so Google AdWords is a good place to start. That, hey, if while I'm trying to build that up, it could be indefinitely, but especially while you're building it up, in order to get that immediate traction or to get people starting to get interested coming to your site, get that word of mouth. And then you may decide, as you start getting enough organic people that are searching you and finding you naturally, you can decide whether or not Google AdWords still makes sense with your strategy. So we say, okay, start out with Google AdWords. It's a good thing. Google has some tools that help you to identify it. Now let's say I'm also looking to build a long-term strategy of SEO, building trust as they come to the website, and also, doing it on a lean budget. So how do you go about, let's make the assumption we have all the Google AdWords in place, it's working great, and I want to now or transition to a bit of the longer term strategy to think about that. How do you go about starting to do the SEO strategy?
Yeah, so the first things that you're gonna do is to that point about it taking so long to get ranked. That's why it should be the first thing that you identify. This should not come after you build the website. You should have that up on your wall and reference it all the time, because of how long it takes to get going. So let's say, yeah, you've got your keywords, you've selected your e-commerce platform. I'm going to put in a plug here, just just because I can. I still think Shopify is the best turnkey solution, unless you're sitting on a bunch of developers who are going to help you out with some other things. If you're just going to go lean and mean, just go with Shopify. Don't overthink it. That's just me though. I don't work for them. But to build that long-term trust with Google and that long-term success with those terms, it means that you're saturating your site in those keywords. So image alt tags, image file names, the domain, every time that you post something online, or post something on the website, be it a page or a post, if there's a meta field for the search engine title and the search engine description, load that thing up with those keywords. Just keep hammering it over and over and over and over again. It's kind of like
now let me maybe just to dive in, because I'm just trying
yeah.
to infuse in, if I'm taking it from people that are very novice or have never done this before. So every website is a bit different, but generally they have a couple things. One is what you actually see on the website, and that is the content, the material, the words, the pictures, and that. And then you'll also have a meta field, and meta field is generally something that's in the back end. In other words, it's not going to show up on your website, but it describes what is this page that you have there is describing. And it does show up. Google will find it. It will show up a lot of times in search terms. So when you go in or Google something in Google, it will say, you'll get the title or what is the one sentence description, and then you'll have that little block of a few sentences that tell you what the website is about or what you can go to. That's generally what the metadata is, and it tells people in a short description, and it tells Google why should they think this page is important. And so that's when you're saying putting in those keywords in the metadata. First of all, put it in the actual content of your page, but you have to think separately about what is that short description of what Google is going to think. This is why people would want to go to that page. So didn't mean to interrupt, just trying to provide that additional explanation.
You're absolutely correct. That's the best way to think about meta fields, and they're important because search engines look at them. But the brute force method is just any time that you have a blank field somewhere. This is the rule of thumb. Put in one of your keywords. There'll be all kinds of updates down the road. Google will redo its search algorithm and say, oh, we emphasize this part of a website over that part of a website, or something like that. The idea is to not have to think about those updates because you've already saturated everything with your SEO keywords. If you went out and asked an SEO professional, what is the best way to do this, they would probably tell you what the algorithm is right now for Google and then try to match that. But this stuff changes all the time. They're not going to give you a heads up about it either. It'll just happen because that's their business. So that the rule of thumb is anytime that you can put in one of those keywords, put it in, and you will be surprised at how quickly you can move up in the ranks just by doing that. And keep that top of mind as you're building the website, or if you're a novice and you've hired somebody else, give them your keywords. Tell them anytime that you can put these somewhere, put it on there. It's got to be boneheadedly obvious, and this is the reason, or to underline why that's so important. In addition to finding, or search engines finding you, interesting people can find you too. This is how Glamour magazine found my product when I was new. They were looking for certain search terms, they found the product, and then they put it in their magazine, and it launched my product into the stratosphere like overnight, which really helps. But this is why I'm saying make it so boneheadedly obvious, because you're dealing with a internet consumer who will give you a fraction of a second of consideration. If there's no room for nuance here, it still has to look like a human being wrote it, not a robot, with some of these things.
Go ahead.
Oh, which takes some editorial massaging, and I guess I'm at a bit of an advantage in that I've worked with words as my career, but but just keep in mind that this is going to sound wrong. You're your customer or the person trying to find you isn't that bright. Just assume that. Just assume that. I'm not saying they are, but assume that and work from there. You will build a rock solid foundation for your e-commerce business just by doing that. It's so important. And that's why I say you got to come up with these keywords first before you do anything else. It works.
Now, one of the things I'd hit on is, and one of the things we talked a little bit before, is when you're looking at keywords, you have to also be judicious about, if all I want to do is, if, as an example, the writer's gloves, if all I did was put in gloves and try to hammer on the keyword gloves, you're going to have a lot broader competition. Now you've got gardening gloves, you've got work gloves, you've got ski gloves, you've got all these other types of gloves, you've got gloves for your feet, gloves for your hand. I mean, everything else, and you're going to pull in a lot. So I think one of the other things that you mentioned, especially is you're one, trying to dominate a given sector, but also two, to be able to actually have a chance of ranking, is you have to, or figure out what your niche is. In other words, figure out what the problem is you're going to be solved, and don't go so narrow that only 5 people will ever think of those keywords, but you have to find a reasonable niche so that you can start to rank, and especially initially on Google, and be able to figure out what that is going to separate you and make you different. So as an example, you did writer's gloves. It's a niche, and it's one that's solving a problem, but it's not every type of gloves. People that are working out, outside in the garden aren't really going to want writer's gloves. They don't solve the problem that they're looking for. So tell us a little bit, how do you go about finding a niche, and how does that impact your SEO?
Yeah, well, the niche, unless you are completely inventing something brand new that's never been seen before, it is very likely, and no knocking any other inventor out there, but you're probably not that novel. There's got to be some comparables. So you're going to go and look at your competitors and try to match what kind of keywords that they're using. If hopefully your competitive set isn't so broad that you're competing with all gloves. Like I don't compete with all gloves. My gloves compete with a handful of companies that have similar-ish products and fingerless gloves. And what I did was I figured out just through trial and error of searching on Google myself for some of these keywords when they were popping up. Because if there's already somebody there, you don't have to reinvent the wheel necessarily. You just want to get to where people are, where they're looking for this product. And so the narrower keywords, I mean, I'll give away some of my secret sauce here. My number one keyword is thin gloves for writing, which is too long for a traditional keyword. Normally they're shorter than that, but for that one, that is the secret sauce for me. And don't anybody listening to this, don't go and try to compete with me here. I've got this dialed in, okay? But the that was my narrow niche that I found by searching for other types of similar products that can key you in to where your niche is. And the other nice thing is that if you're feeling just starting out being a little intimidated by being in the same company as your competitors, remember this: you are self-selecting your audience when you go that narrow. And this is why even if I came up with another invention tomorrow, I would build a separate website for it, because I want to self-select my traffic. I want the right traffic on my website. And if that means that I pull a little bit of customers over from my competitors, that's okay. Hopefully they're not listening. But that self-selection from those narrower keywords helps. So copy what your competitors are doing in the SEO space, and you will end up in your chosen niche. Or if you don't have direct competitors, go with something close. Just try to get a feel for, if you were a customer looking for this product, what would you type in, and then go from there. There's no one correct way to do this, but get to that narrower list. You don't want to compete with all gloves. You don't want to compete with irrelevant gloves. You want writing gloves. That's where I am, and that's what I dominate right now.
Well, it's always good to dominate your space. So now we are starting to run, and there is so many more things that we could, or SEO is kind of a fun topic, or at least for me, I always kind of find it interesting. Now we could talk for hours and everybody be like, oh, this is so overwhelming. So I think that that is a great start as to where, where people can consider. And so as we are starting to wrap towards the end of this episode, I always like to wrap up the conversation with the final question that I ask. And so we'll jump to that now. So that question is within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
Well, the biggest myth I is that you need a fulfillment partner. This always comes up. Is that I guess if you were some large company, yes, you need a fulfillment solution that's probably not in-house. But so many of small businesses out there, and there are many who are in my shoes. Um, they outsource to Amazon fulfillment warehouses, to Shopify fulfillment warehouses. They have their own network now. There are a million of them out there that you could use, little ones, big ones, whatever. And what I would say is, unless if you can find a way to keep fulfillment in-house, just fulfill stuff yourself, your margins are better, of course. You keep more of each sale. And yes, it's extra time, but you're basically handing over your business to a fulfillment service that does not always have your best interests in mind. You are basically making them a partner because they hold your inventory, they touch your inventory, they interact with your customers, they do all these different things. And the great part about it is that they're not paying you for that privilege, you're paying them for that privilege. And people don't look at it that way. They look at fulfillment as being this very necessary part of a small business. And maybe it is for whatever reason, maybe it is. But if you can avoid it, do it, because they will end up running your business. There are all sorts of changes that happen with fulfillment providers that say, oh, we can only take this kind of box. Well, now I got to do a whole nother manufacturing run to comply. Or, oh, our trucks don't take this kind of postage. Or, oh, we can't send something this way. Or there's all kinds of things. They end up sabotaging some of the things that you would like to do. They can save you a lot of time. That's nice. It's nice to sit and just get a report. But so many small entrepreneurs like myself who are sitting on like 1, 2, 3 products, and like this is their side business or something. They're like, oh yeah, I sent off. I just sent it to Amazon. They have their manufacturer, and their manufacturer is overseas. They ship it directly to an Amazon warehouse. The entrepreneur never sees their own product. They don't do quality control. They don't do any of this thing because the assumption is, well, you're not a real business unless you have a fulfillment partner. You don't want to be sitting there stuffing envelopes all night. Actually, I do. And I still do in most cases. I have other people who help me, but if I got to go in there and do it, I'm getting off track here, Devin. Sorry.
It's a great one. I was trying to give it a little bit of a condense, so we'll wrap it up. That's
okay.
But no, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I do think a lot of times, whether it's you talking about fulfillment partners, I have a small family business that my son works at it. We have some of his cousins, and they help to fulfill it. And I think that you can look and see you don't always have to be the big company that has all of or be overly fancy. Sometimes it is the simple, the easy things that make the sense, and you can do it a lot of times on a much smaller scale than what oftentimes is kind of out there in the marketplace. So I loved that kind of thought and feedback and dispelling that myth. So as we now wrap up and as we finish up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, I'm at thewritersglove.com. The writers, like you're writing, thewritersglove.com. That's where I am. And I guess if you wanted to send me a message, that's the best way to do it.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to reach out, connect with you, and support a great business. So Thank you again, Ben, for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, to help us to share this expertise with all the other startups and small business out there, please click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Makes us or helps us to reach all those businesses and share this great expertise. And on that note, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else to start up your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Ben, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you very much.